right or not?
Consulting profiler who specializes in art crime. Incredible intelligence at the most wanted art thief in the world.
Non provided you.
Listen to me, unless we stop it, that egg is going to be stolen.
Already gone, you say? As I recall. May I ask, are you looking for?
They're gold, and gold reflects radiation.
Expensive.
Well, there's only one way to find out. Sorry, big man, but there's no food or drink in the museum.
No, wait!
I know you, you're the...
Three Golden Eggs, one global manhunt, and the most watched movie Netflix had ever put out. That's Red Notice in 3 sentences. But the movie itself runs just under 2 hours, so let's do this properly. Released in November 2021, Red Notice shattered Netflix records straight out of the gate. In its first 4 weeks alone, it pulled 328 million hours of viewing time. For context, that's a number that hadn't been touched before on the platform. Written and directed by Rawson Marshall Thurber, the man behind Central Intelligence and Skyscraper, the film assembled a cast that sounds less like a real movie and more like a fever dream a studio executive had after a very good meeting. Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, and Gal Gadot, together. In one film, trading barbs and punches across 4 continents. Critics largely rolled their eyes. Audiences lost their minds. Rotten Tomatoes shows a 37% critic score sitting directly across from a 92% audience rating. That gap isn't a bug, it's the whole point. Before we get into marble museums and jungle bunkers, there's one piece of vocabulary the film wants you to have before anything else happens. A red notice, as the movie explains right up front, is the highest level warrant Interpol can issue. It's not a regular alert. It's the global all points bulletin of all global all points bulletins. When a red notice goes out, every law enforcement agency on the planet is officially put on notice that one specific person needs to be found, apprehended, and brought in, no matter where they are, no matter what it takes. It's Interpol's way of saying, this person is out of chances. 3 specific people are going to earn 1 by the time this story wraps up. You should probably remember that. The film opens inside the Museo Nazionale Romano in Rome, and it doesn't waste a second warming up. We're thrown directly into a situation already in motion. Museum security has been briefed, Interpol is on site, and walking through the gallery with the kind of measured calm that makes other people instinctively clear a path is John Hartley, played by Dwayne Johnson. He's the FBI's top profiler. He's here because of an egg, not metaphorically. An actual egg. Cleopatra's egg, one of 3 legendary golden objects that, according to the film's mythology, Mark Antony commissioned as a wedding gift for Cleopatra. Each egg is gold, jewel-encrusted, and worth enough to fund a small country's military budget. 2 of the 3 are known to exist somewhere in the world. The third has been missing for centuries. The one sitting behind protective glass in the museum's exhibition room tonight is Egg 01, or at least that's what the placard says. Alongside Hartley is Inspector Urvashi Das, played with sharp, unamused precision by Ritu Arya. She's Interpol. She's good at her job. She has approximately 0 patience for Hartley's FBI confidence, and their dynamic from the very first exchange crackles with that specific professional rivalry energy. 2 people who are both excellent at what they do and quietly irritated that the other person exists. An intelligence tip came in warning that a theft attempt is imminent. The target, this egg. Hartley walks up to the display case. He studies it. His expression shifts. That's not the real egg.1G. What's on display is a forgery. Near perfect, but not perfect enough for Hartley's trained eye. The real egg isn't here, and the only explanation is that it's already been lifted, or is in the process of being taken right now. The room locks down immediately. Security scrambles. Das starts issuing commands, and somewhere in the contained chaos of an exhibition hall going into full lockdown, one person in the crowd makes a deliberate move toward the exit because the closing window is about 10 seconds from shutting completely. That person is Nolan Booth, Ryan Reynolds, all of him. The movie establishes who Booth is in about 30 seconds of screen time, and it does it cleverly, not by telling us, but by showing us what he's already done. He got into this museum before anyone else. He identified the real egg. He made the switch himself, quietly, efficiently, without leaving a trace. He was prepared to walk out of the Museo Nazionale Romano with Cleopatra's first egg in his bag like he'd just finished a pleasant evening of high culture. The only problem? Hartley was 2 minutes faster than Booth expected. Booth tries for the exit. The door seals before he gets through. Trapped in a room and caught, though, are 2 very different things when you're the world's second most wanted art thief, and you've built your entire career on having 3 backup plans minimum. The chase that follows genuinely earns its place in the film. Booth bolts, Hartley gives chase, and the 2 men go tearing through the museum, past marble sculptures, down wide staircases, through exhibition rooms that look like they cost more to build than most people will earn in a decade. Booth uses everything: security barriers, narrow corridors, the general confusion of a room full of people who did not sign up for a foot pursuit tonight. He's fast. More than that, he's clever. Every obstacle he creates is designed not just to slow Hartley down, but to change the geometry of the pursuit, to force Hartley into reactions instead of anticipations. The chase spills outside into Rome, which is exactly as chaotic as you'd expect. Cobblestones, traffic. A city that was not built with high-speed foot pursuits in mind. Booth weaves through it with the ease of someone who has done this in far worse conditions. Hartley, to be fair, is not exactly a man who gets outrun often, but Booth doesn't need to outrun him. He needs to outthink him. And he does. Booth slips away, cleanly, deliberately, and leaves Hartley standing in a Roman alley holding nothing but the knowledge that the world's second-best art thief is exactly as good as advertised. No egg recovered, no arrest made, just the opening move in what is going to become a very long, very expensive game. Cut 2. Bali. Of course it's Bali. Nolan Booth is wanted in 18 countries, has stolen priceless artwork from some of the most fortified institutions on Earth, and his home base is a stunning villa with an infinity pool overlooking rice terraces and an art collection that most definitely did not come from any licensed dealer. He's living the kind of life that makes you simultaneously outraged and genuinely impressed. The man has taste. He arrives home carrying the egg, relaxed, pleased with himself. Hartley is sitting in his living room DENIDE waiting, comfortable, like it's his house, and Booth is the unexpected guest who let himself in. He's not even standing, he's just there. This single moment does more for Hartley's character than the entire Rome chase. It tells you exactly how he operates. He didn't lose Booth in that alley. He let Booth go. He tracked him here, coordinated with Inspector Das and an Interpol strike team staged just outside the perimeter, and set up a clean, controlled capture. Chasing Booth through Rome was never the smart play. Waiting for Booth to walk into his own home, that was. Hartley doesn't react. He anticipates. That's the whole character. Booth is arrested. The egg is recovered. Das and the team move efficiently. Everything appears, for one brief and almost satisfying moment, to be resolved. Then something happens that nobody in that room sees. One figure in the Interpol strike team isn't Interpol. Moving through the controlled activity of the arrest, calm and unhurried, she reaches the transport vehicle where the egg is being secured, and in one practiced, invisible motion, swaps the real egg for another forgery. No camera catches it. Das doesn't catch it. Hartley doesn't catch it. Nobody catches it, except us, the audience. Because the movie cuts just wide enough for us to see what happened, and it wants us to carry that knowledge into everything that follows. A third player just entered the game. She was there the whole time, standing right next to the people trying to catch her, and she's already 3 moves ahead of everyone. Her name is Sarah Black. The art world knows her as the Bishop. Nand. And from the moment she slips away from that scene with the real Cleopatra's egg, Red Notice stops being a simple cat-and-mouse story and becomes something else entirely. A 3-way chess match played across multiple continents, where nobody is quite who they appear to be, and the person you least suspect is usually the one holding all the pieces. The board is set. 24 hours is all it takes to go from FBI golden boy to a man in handcuffs on a tarmac. The morning after Booth's arrest, Inspector Doss pulls Hartley aside. Her expression isn't the usual mix of professional rivalry and mild contempt he's used to getting from her. It's something different. Controlled fury, maybe. Or the face of someone who has already made a decision and is now just delivering the paperwork. She shows him the transfer records. $8 million. Wired to an offshore account in Hartley's name on the exact same day the forgery was discovered in Rome. The timestamp doesn't just implicate him, it frames him surgically and completely. Das contacted the FBI while Hartley was still basking in what he thought was a clean capture. The FBI came back with the answer she apparently already expected. They had no record of any authorized operation involving John Hartley in Rome. No sanction, no mission brief, no trail of any kind that connects to the Bureau. Hartley has an explanation, obviously. He always has an explanation. Das isn't interested. The badge comes off. The cuffs go on. And the man who spent his entire career on the arresting side of that equation gets to experience what it feels like from the other direction, which, by all available evidence, does not suit him at all. Here's what the movie does smartly in this sequence. It doesn't let Hartley be passive. Even being arrested, even being stripped of everything that makes him him, he's working. Watching Doss's team, cataloging details. His mind is still running at full profiler speed, trying to reverse engineer who built the frame, how deep it goes, and most importantly, who had both the resources to wire $8 million without a trace and the specific knowledge of his operation to time it perfectly. Only one person knew both those things, the Bishop. She wasn't just stealing the egg in Bali, she was tidying up the competition at the same time. One move, 2 problems solved, acquire the asset, eliminate the only investigator with the profile to actually catch her. The framing isn't just evidence of her resources, it's evidence of how she thinks, ruthless, efficient, personal without ever being emotional. Hartley gets to sit with that knowledge for a very long flight. The Russian prison they drop him into looks exactly like you're imagining it. Concrete, gray, cold in that particular way that feels less like weather and more like a philosophical position. No windows designed for natural light. Guards who treat the concept of warmth as a foreign policy issue. The kind of facility that exists specifically to make people feel like the world has not just forgotten them, but actively decided they don't exist. Hartley, to his credit, walks in like he's checking into a hotel he already knows he's going to dislike, but plans to leave very shortly. His cell assignment gets him a bunkmate. Nolan Booth grins when Hartley walks through the door. Not a polite, surprised to see you smile. A full, deeply satisfied, you have no idea how much I've been looking forward to this grin. The man has been sitting in a Russian prison cell, and apparently the only thing that has genuinely brightened his day is watching the FBI agent who chased him through the streets of Rome get locked in a room he can't profiler his way out of. "Welcome," Booth says, gesturing around their shared quarters like a gracious host showing off a penthouse. The delivery is pure Reynolds. Not. What follows is one of the film's best stretches, not because anything massively plot-critical happens, but because the movie finally gets to just let these two people exist in the same space and figure each other out. dynamic that gets established in that cell is the engine that powers everything for the rest of the runtime. Hartley is furious and methodical. His whole identity, FBI profiler, the best in the world at reading people and situations, has just been turned against him. He was read, he was played, and the person who did it didn't even need to be in the room when it happened. That kind of thing doesn't sit well in a man who built his entire self-image on being unreadable. Booth is the opposite. Comfortable, almost suspiciously so. He's been in worse spots than this, clearly, and he has the loose-limbed energy of someone whose threat calculation is just permanently calibrated higher than most people's. A Russian prison? Fine. An FBI agent for a bunkmate. Actually, that's interesting. He's also, it turns out, the only person in the world right now who has exactly the information Hartley needs. The eggs. Booth explains it the same way he explains most things, with the slightly detached, vaguely amused air of someone who already knows the punchline and is choosing to be generous about the setup. Not you, Mark Antony. Cleopatra. 3 golden eggs commissioned as a wedding gift, so extravagant and so specific that they became, over centuries, the holy grail of a very niche category of obsessive collector. 2 have been located, authenticated, and passed through various private hands across history. The 3rd has never been definitively found, only rumored, chased, and occasionally confirmed by people who turned out to be wrong or lying. An unnamed Egyptian billionaire wants all 3. His daughter is getting married. He has, as a wedding present concept, chosen to spend $300 million to acquire Cleopatra's complete set. That number lands in the cell and just sits there. 300 million, or 3 eggs. Booth watches Hartley process it with the patience of a man who has had a lot of time to sit with this number himself. Ud. The bishop already has the real egg A1. That's established. She took it right out from under Das's nose in Bali, and the substitute forgery has presumably been secured in an Interpol evidence locker where it will continue to fool everyone for as long as it needs to. Egg 2's location is known. It's in the private collection of an arms dealer named Suto Voce. Egg 2-3? That one's the mystery. Nobody knows where it is. Or rather, very few people know, and none of them are in this prison. Booth has a theory about Egg E3. He's been working on it for years. Hartley listens, doesn't say much, takes it all in. He's doing that thing profilers do, not just hearing the words, but watching the person saying them. What does Booth actually want from this conversation? He didn't have to explain any of this. He could have let Hartley sit here in the dark, stewing over a framed job he can't prove, and a career that's been destroyed by a woman he barely got to see. Instead, Booth is offering something, not explicitly, but the shape of a deal is in the room. Here's what Hartley eventually proposes. Once he's done profiling Booth from 3 feet away and decided he understands him well enough to make the pitch, help me catch the bishop. Not steal the eggs, not split the 300M, not do any of the things Booth would naturally be inclined to do given the opportunity. Just help Hartley get close enough to the bishop to actually bring her in, because she's the one who destroyed his career, and the only way to rebuild it is to drag her into an Interpol evidence room and let the truth of the frame-up speak for itself. In return, Hartley will put in the specific recommendation that moves Booth up the most wanted list, from 2 to I1. That last part is not as insane as it sounds. Booth has spent his entire criminal career being beaten to the top spot by the bishop. He hates it. Every interview, every profile, every mention of the world's greatest art thieves, it's always the bishop first, Nolan Booth second. The competitive wound runs deep, pride and professional vanity dressed up as criminal ambition, but underneath it, just a man who wants to be acknowledged as the best at the thing he spent his life becoming the best at. Hartley saw that immediately. Of course he did. Number 1 on the FBI's most wanted list, Booth repeats, turning the idea over like it's an object he hasn't decided whether to keep yet. The conversation ends without a clean handshake, but the agreement is there, loose, unverified, built entirely on 2 men who have no reason to trust each other, deciding, pragmatically, that right now they have nobody else. Getting out of a Russian prison with no allies, no weapons, and no official standing is not a straightforward exercise. The escape sequence that follows is the first time the movie really tests what Hartley and Booth look like as a functioning unit, and the answer is chaotic, argumentative, and surprisingly effective. Booth knows the facility better than Hartley expected. Don't ask. Hartley has the physical presence and the tactical pattern recognition. Between them, they cover ground that neither could cover alone. There's a moment where Booth's cleverness threads a problem. Hartley's directness would have smashed right through, and instead of acknowledging it, Hartley just moves on with the momentum, and Booth files that away with a private smile. The escape works. Barely. With the kind of margin that looks improvisational but probably required both of them operating at ceiling capacity.us. They surface outside the facility, breath fogging in the cold air, wearing the slightly unfocused expression of people who have just survived something and haven't processed it yet. Hartley has no badge, no resources, no institutional support of any kind. He's technically a fugitive from the same law enforcement apparatus he spent his career inside. Booth is always a fugitive. This is just Tuesday for him. Somewhere far from this prison, in a location neither of them can pin down, the bishop is already moving. She knows where Egg Taitu is. She knows who has it. She also knows that Hartley, whether locked up or not, is the one variable in this equation that doesn't behave predictably. She'll find out about the escape soon enough, and when she does, instead of running from Hartley and Booth or sending someone to neutralize the problem, she'll come to them, because that's what the bishop does. She doesn't react to developments. She absorbs them into her plan. There is no version of this story where she isn't already several steps ahead of where you think she is. She walks in like she owns the place. That's the only way to describe it. No disguise this time, or rather a different kind of disguise. Not a face swap or a forged credential. Just confidence, worn so completely and convincingly that it functions as its own camouflage. A woman moving through a maximum security Russian facility with the body language of someone who scheduled this visit weeks in advance and finds the whole thing mildly inconvenient. Guards don't stop people who look like they belong. That's the oldest social engineering trick in the book, and Sarah Black has spent her career proving it works every single time. Think about the audacity for a second. Hartley and Booth have just survived a Russian prison. No resources, no contacts, nothing going for them except each other and a very improvised exit plan. And the bishop, rather than using that window to get a head start on the eggs, comes to them. She could be in Sotovoshi's vault right now. She could be in Egypt running down leads on Egg E3. She chose this instead. That choice tells you everything about how she calculates risk. She doesn't see Hartley and Booth as a threat she needs to outrun. She sees them as a variable she'd rather fold into her plan than leave loose in the world to cause unpredictable problems. Control what you can, everything else is noise. The proposal she puts on the table is clean, as bishop proposals tend to be. She knows where Egg 2 is, so does Booth. But knowing where something is and actually getting to it are two very different problems when the something in question belongs to Sotovoce. He's an arms dealer, well-connected in ways that make traditional law enforcement approaches complicated. His private collection is, by all accounts, housed in a vault that would give a lot of professional thieves a very long pause. Getting inside that vault means getting access to Sotovoce's world, which means an invitation, a cover identity, and the right setting. The setting, as it happens, is already presenting itself. A masquerade ball in Valencia, Spain. Sotovoce hosts it annually. Exclusive. Theatrical, exactly the kind of event where the security is tight enough to feel secure and porous enough for the right person to exploit. Bishop's offer to Booth is a partnership. She handles the access side. Sotovoce knows her, trusts her to a point, which is to say he trusts her about as far as you'd trust anyone in their particular professional circle. Booth handles the technical extraction once they're inside. Split the reward 3 ways. 2 million each was apparently the number she floated, though the 300M buyer makes that division seem deliberately low-balled, and everyone walks away cleaner than they arrived. Booth's face does something complicated when she finishes talking. He doesn't say yes. That matters. In a different movie, Booth is the type of character who takes the deal with the attractive woman and assumes he can outmaneuver the complications later. But Red Notice has already done the work of showing us that Booth is sharper than his Reynolds-flavored wisecracks make him look. He heard the same subtext in that offer that you probably heard reading it. Bishop is proposing terms where she controls the access, which means she controls the exit, which means the moment Egg 2 is in hand, she's in a position to take it and leave Booth holding whatever consequences materialize. She played him once already at the Hartley mansion when she framed Booth's escape route in Rome. She's not getting 2 of those. Hartley's counteroffer is the one Booth actually takes, which is interesting in itself because Hartley's deal is arguably worse on paper. No 300M cut, no walkaway clean. Help me catch the bishop, and in return, you become the most wanted art thief on the planet instead of the second most wanted. That's the deal. Number 1 on the list. Some people climb corporate ladders their whole lives chasing a title. Booth has been chasing this particular title since the Bishop took the top spot from him, and the wound is personal in a way that the 300M prize money genuinely is not. Money Booth can get. He's proven that. What he can't buy is having the world acknowledge that Sarah Black is better at this than him. That's the one thing that actually costs him something. Hartley read him right. He almost always does. Getting to Valencia means solving 3 problems first. No passports. Hartley's credentials have been revoked and flagged, and Booth's documents, while plentiful, are all burned identities that Interpol has since catalogued. No money. Their collective liquid resources at this point amount to whatever Booth had on him when he was arrested, which after the prison laundry process is slightly less than that. No plane, commercial travel is out, and the kind of private charter you board without documentation usually comes with questions. The film skips the logistics, which is the right call. Nobody needs to watch Hartley and Booth argue over a burner phone for 20 minutes. What matters is that they get to Spain, and the movie's comfortable enough in its own skin to trust the audience on that one. They arrive in Valencia looking considerably better than 2 men who just escaped from a Russian correctional facility have any right to look. Some movies earn that. Red Notice earns it by never pretending these 2 are ordinary people in an extraordinary situation. They're extraordinary people in an extraordinary situation, which changes the physics of what's plausible. Valencia, by the way, is gorgeous. The city gives the film something Rome and Bali couldn't quite. A setting with heat and color that matches the energy of what's about to happen. The architecture is operatic. The streets are warm. It's the kind of place where a masquerade ball hosted by an arms dealer feels almost appropriate. Sotto Voce's event is black tie, masks mandatory, and held in a private estate whose grounds are impressive enough that the security perimeter is genuinely a few minutes of walking before you hit a wall or a camera. Getting in without an invitation isn't a smash and grab problem. It requires a specific kind of social engineering, arriving at the right moment, looking exactly right, moving with the right amount of certainty. The kind of thing that Booth could probably manage solo, but would do better with backup. The kind of thing Hartley, who has spent his career getting into rooms he wasn't supposed to enter, approaches like a technical puzzle. They get into the party. Formal wear, masks in place. Somewhere in the crowd, because of course, Inspector Das is also present, working her own angle. She hasn't stopped hunting either of them since the Bali arrest, and the Interpol warrant on both their names hasn't gotten any quieter. That's 3 parties now converging on the same Valencia estate, each chasing something slightly different and none of them fully aware of what the others know. Plus the Bishop, who invited herself. Plus Sotto Voce, who lives here and has home field advantage in every possible sense. What I find genuinely clever about the structure of this section is how the movie stacks the complications without making them feel mechanical. You could map the Valencia sequence on a whiteboard, and it would look like a traffic diagram from a city planner's nightmare. 6 moving pieces, multiple objectives, overlapping coverages, no clear path through. But on screen, it doesn't feel like a diagram. It feels like a party where everything could go wrong at any moment, which is exactly how the best heist sequences work. The masquerade setting does real work here. Everyone is masked, which democratizes the paranoia. Hartley and Booth don't know who's looking at them. They don't know who's working for whom. The Bishop could be 3 feet away or on the other side of the room. Das could have half a dozen plainclothes officers moving through the crowd. Sotto Voce's private security could already be tracking them from the moment they cleared the front gate. Under the masks, everyone is running a different game. And somewhere in that estate, behind a door that wasn't on any floor plan they could find, Ege 2 is sitting in a vault. Booth spots the access point first. Naturally. Hartley spots the risk Booth missed. Also naturally. Between the 2 of them, they put together an approach. Not a clean one, not a foolproof one, but one that has enough moving parts to survive the first thing going wrong while staying loose enough to improvise around the second. It's the kind of plan that looks improvised to everyone watching, but was actually assembled very fast by 2 people who are both, in different ways, excellent at this. They move toward the vault. The Bishop moves toward the vault. Das moves toward something. She doesn't know what yet, but her instincts are pulling her in the same direction as everyone else. And then Ed Sheeran is there, playing himself, at an arms dealer's masquerade ball in Valencia, because Red Notice knows exactly what kind of movie it is, and it commits to that knowledge completely. 9. The cameo lands because it's so aggressively absurd. Nobody in the film questions it. Booth clocks him, makes a comment, and keeps moving. Hartley's expression says everything without saying anything. The party rolls on. There's a metaphor in there somewhere about the kind of world these characters inhabit, one where weapons dealers and pop stars exist at the same event and both seem equally at home. But unpacking that feels like doing homework during a theme park ride, so let's just appreciate it for what it is and keep moving. The vault is getting closer. Whatever comes next happens fast. The vault door is the easy part. That sounds backwards, but it makes sense once you understand who's doing the work. Booth doesn't brute force locks, he reads them. Years of studying security systems across 3 continents have given him a specific kind of fluency with mechanisms that most people only understand as obstacles. He moves through the technical challenge of the vault entry the way a pianist moves through a piece they've played 100 times, methodically, quietly, with just enough visible concentration to remind you that it still requires skill even when it looks effortless. Hartley stands watch at the corridor. The party noise filters down from above. Music, laughter, the ambient hum of expensive people having an expensive evening. And he tracks the rhythm of it the way he tracks everything, listening for the change in tone that signals something has shifted. The vault opens. Inside, the collection. Sotto voce's private accumulation of things that were never supposed to leave the rooms they came from. Paintings, sculptures, objects that exist in that uncomfortable gray zone between cultural heritage and personal property. And there, among everything else, lit with the particular care that serious collectors reserve for their most significant pieces. Ege 2. Booth moves toward it. The bishop is already in the room. How she got in there first is the kind of question the movie doesn't linger on, because the answer is obvious to anyone paying attention. She's been operating in Sotto Voce's world long enough to know every service entrance, every blind spot in the camera coverage, every moment in the party's schedule where the security rotation creates a 30-second gap. Hartley and Booth had to build their approach from scratch. She had the blueprint memorized. She's holding the egg! The 3 of them stand there for a moment. Booth slightly breathless from the lockwork, Hartley having followed him in when the watch position became irrelevant, and the bishop perfectly composed, the egg cradled in one hand like she's already decided how this conversation ends. What nobody planned for is the display cases lining the walls. Sotto Voce's vault doubles as a gallery, and his particular collecting taste runs toward historical weaponry. The walls hold an extraordinary variety of antique arms, swords, daggers, spears, ornamental pieces from cultures and centuries that span most of recorded history. Under normal circumstances, they're art objects behind glass. Under these circumstances, they become the chaotic toolkit for one of the film's best sequences. Nobody plans for a sword fight, and yet the brawl that erupts in that vault is genuinely funny and genuinely tense at the same time, which is a harder combination to pull off than it sounds. The bishop fights with the controlled precision of someone formally trained and long practiced. Every movement economic, targeted, designed to end things quickly. Hartley fights the way large, exceptionally strong former law enforcement officers fight, with force and spatial awareness and the kind of body positioning that makes it very difficult to get around him. Booth fights with an improvisational creativity that probably has a proper name in some martial arts tradition, but looks, in practice, like a man making very fast decisions about which historical weapon is most useful in the next 2 seconds. They pick things off the walls. They use them. Sotto Voce is going to be absolutely furious about some of these pieces. The bishop handles both of them simultaneously with the ease of someone doing a task she finds mildly demanding rather than genuinely difficult. That's the most unsettling thing about watching her fight, not the technique, but the temperature. She's not angry, she's not scared. She's just solving a problem with her body the same way she solves every other problem, efficiently, without sentiment, with one eye already on what comes after. She gets to Hartley first, cuffs one wrist, gets to Booth before he can create distance, cuffs his wrist to Hartley's. Booth looks at the handcuff, then at Hartley, then back at the handcuff. She did! The 2 of them are now physically attached to each other, which in the abstract is a comedic development and in the specific context of being in a heavily secured private vault inside an arms dealer's estate is a logistical catastrophe. Every exit option just got significantly more complicated. Every fight option too. Moving fast requires coordination they haven't had time to develop. Separating requires a key that the bishop is currently pocketing. She picks up the egg, straightens her dress, looks at them both with an expression that is not quite sympathy but is perhaps its distant, colder cousin. Then Sotto Voce walks in with his security team, and he doesn't look surprised. That's the moment the temperature of the whole scene drops. If Sotto Voce were a man reacting to intruders in his vault, he'd look alarmed. Angry, maybe. The adrenaline flush of discovering a breach in your most secured space has a very specific physiological signature, and none of it is on his face. What's on his face instead is the settled calm of a man who was told company was coming and has been waiting for them to arrive. He knew. The bishop warned him. She's not here to steal Egg 2 from Sotto Voce. She's here in partnership with Sotto Voce, an arrangement that presumably predates tonight by some distance. Their deal, as it emerges in the conversation that follows, is structured around the Egyptian buyer. She brings all 3 eggs. They split the 300M. She gets her cut, he gets his, and the buyer gets his wedding present, which means Sotto Voce was never the target. He was the co-conspirator. And Hartley and Booth just walked directly into the one room in Europe where both of them are least welcome, handcuffed together, with no backup, no weapons that haven't already been deployed in a largely unsuccessful sword fight, and no leverage of any kind. Every good betrayal has a tell, and looking back at everything the bishop has done from the moment she appeared in that Bali strike team, hers is visible if you know what you're looking for. She never moves directly towards something. She always moves to a position adjacent to it, creating the conditions for someone else to do the exposed work while she stays clean and close. In Rome, she let Booth run the theft. In Bali, she let Hartley run the arrest. In Valencia, she let Hartley and Booth run the vault entry while she came in through a different door entirely. She's never the one caught in the open. She's always the one who's already inside. Hartley knows this. You can see it in the way he processes what's happening. Not panic, but a very controlled recalibration. The profiler in him is already filing the architecture of the frame, how she set this up, where the margins were, what she anticipated he'd do and when. He's angry. The anger is real. But it's not overwhelming him the way it would overwhelm most people, because Hartley is, at some fundamental level, the kind of man who finds even his own defeats analytically interesting. Booth is less philosophical about it. So just to be clear, Booth says, addressing both the bishop and Sotto Voce with the specific tone of a man who has accepted he's losing the current round but is reserving enormous energy for later, this whole thing. Sotto Voce's security team moves them out of the vault. The conversation, apparently, is over. What follows is not comfortable. Inside the estate. Not in the party rooms, not among the chandeliers and masked guests and Ed Sheeran somewhere in the background, running through a set nobody expected, but in the quieter, less decorative parts of the building where arms dealers apparently keep the infrastructure of their less social activities. The message from Sotto Voce is clear. Even without being stated explicitly, they're here until they become useful, and after that, they're a problem to be solved. The bishop, for what it's worth, doesn't stick around for this part. She has an egg in hand and a timeline to keep. Wherever Eggy 3 is, she's already thinking about it, already calculating distances and access problems and what Hartley and Booth, knowing she's working with Sotto Voce now, means for her next move. Her exit from the Valencia estate is quiet. Clean. She's gone before either of them fully registers that she left. Handcuffed together in a room they can't leave, with a heavily armed security team outside the door and an arms dealer who now has every incentive to keep them exactly where they are, Hartley and Booth have a very specific problem. It's the kind of problem that, stripped of all its globe-trotting context, reduces to something almost simple. Two people who've only been working together for a short time, in a situation where working together is no longer optional, needing to figure out fast whether they actually trust each other enough to get out of this. Booth makes a decision. He mentions Egypt. Not the whole story. Not yet. But he floats it carefully, the way you float something when you're testing whether someone is paying enough attention to catch the significance. A location. A hint. Something he's been sitting on about Eggy 3 that he hasn't told Hartley yet, because information is currency and you don't spend it until the exchange rate is right. The exchange rate, at this particular moment, is, tell me what you know and maybe we get out of here. Hartley listens. The anger from the vault is still there, but underneath it, the profiler has already started running. A way out exists. It always exists. They just have to find it before Sotto Voce decides they've run out of usefulness, which, given the current situation, is a timer with an uncertain but not generous countdown. Sotto Voce is not a patient man. Whatever timeline he gave Hartley and Booth to become useful has a very short runway, and the interrogation that follows their capture is less about extracting specific intelligence and more about pressure. The kind applied steadily and without apology to remind two people that their situation is genuinely serious and the man holding them there has no particular reason to keep them comfortable. Pain has a way of clarifying what actually matters. For Hartley, what matters is the exit. He's cataloging the room even through the discomfort. Guard positioning, door timing, where the nearest improvised advantage lives. The profiler doesn't clock off. It's not a choice, it's a reflex, as automatic as flinching. Some part of his brain is always mapping. For Booth, what matters is the timing. He's been carrying a piece of information like a card held deliberately below the table, and the question has never been whether to play it, it's always been when. Too early and it gets verified, found false, and the consequences are severe. Too late and the window closes entirely. The sweet spot is exactly here, in this room, when the pressure is high enough that a good piece of intelligence lands with maximum impact and minimum scrutiny. He asks to speak to the bishop directly. She comes back. Of course she does, because the bishop doesn't ignore potential leverage, and the fact that Booth specifically asked for her rather than trying to negotiate with sotto voce tells her something is on the table worth hearing. She enters the room with the same composed energy she carries everywhere. No readable anticipation, just attention, directed and precise. Booth tells her about the pyramid. Not a pyramid, the Great Pyramid of Giza. Specifically, a sealed chamber within it that most Egyptologists don't know exists, accessible through a passage that doesn't appear on any modern architectural survey. Booth says he spent 3 years tracking the provenance of Agi III through private auction records from the 1940s, following a trail that led through a Swiss estate sale, then a Viennese collection, then a series of private transfers that ended with an Egyptian collector who had the egg built into the physical structure of a hidden room as, and this is the part that lands with real weight, a tribute to Cleopatra herself. The egg is in the pyramid, sealed inside a chamber, waiting. He delivers this with exactly the right amount of reluctance, not too eager. Eager is suspicious, not too resistant. Excessive resistance makes people work harder to extract information, which gives them time to test it. Just enough friction to make the intelligence feel earned rather than offered. The bishop listens. Her expression doesn't shift, but something behind her eyes does. A micro-recalibration, the almost invisible process of someone slotting a new piece of information into a structure they've been building for years and checking whether it fits. It fits. She nods once, looks at sotto voce. They reach the kind of wordless agreement that people in long-running criminal partnerships reach, and then she's gone again, this time with actual urgency behind the exit, though she'd never let it show on her face. Egypt. She's going to Egypt. The false tip is elegant in its simplicity, and watching it land is one of the quiet pleasures of the film. Booth has been sitting on this particular story for years, not because it's true, but because he built it to sound true. The detail about the 1940s auction records is real. The Viennese collection is real. The trail exists because Booth spent real time constructing a plausible path that any serious researcher could partially verify before the dead ends kicked in. He built a false provenance the way a good forger builds a fake painting, grounded in just enough documented reality to survive casual inspection. The chamber in the pyramid doesn't exist, or if it does, it has nothing to do with Cleopatra's egg. He designed this exit specifically for a situation where he needed to move a very smart, very suspicious person off the board long enough to create a window. The bishop going to Egypt buys them, at best, maybe 48 hours before she gets on site, starts pulling at threads, and realizes she's been handed a beautifully constructed nothing. 48 hours is enough. Getting out of sotto voce's estate without the bishop present turns out to be significantly more achievable. She was the variable that made every escape calculation dangerous, not because sotto voce's security is weak, but because the bishop has a specific gift for anticipating the moves people make under pressure and positioning herself ahead of them. With her en route to Cairo, the board is simpler. Still difficult, but simpler. The escape itself involves less elegance and more determination than the prison break in Russia. Hartley applies the kind of direct physical problem-solving that sotto voce's guards did not adequately prepare for. Booth threads the gaps Hartley creates. The handcuffs, still technically in play for part of it, transition from liability to unexpected weapon, which is exactly the kind of creative reframing Booth specializes in. They surface outside the estate with the distant sounds of Valencia's nightlife still audible and the immediate awareness that they are running out of time on multiple fronts simultaneously. They go to Egypt anyway. This is the part that surprises people on first watch, and it makes complete sense on second. Hartley doesn't need the pyramid to have the egg inside it. He needs the pyramid to be the place where everything comes to a head, where the bishop discovers the deception, where Soto Voce's partnership with her fractures when he finds out she left him behind, and most importantly, where Hartley can demonstrate to the world's E1 art thief that she got played, professionally, by Booth, who she's clearly always considered the lesser talent. The pyramid sequence has a visual gravity that the film earns by staging it with genuine scale. The Giza Plateau at dawn is not a set you can fake in a studio. The sheer weight of those structures against an early sky is something cameras capture honestly even when everything around them is constructed. Our two men arrive looking for a chamber that isn't there, and the tension of the sequence comes not from finding something but from the controlled wait for the bishop to arrive and realize what she's looking at. She gets there. Her team works the passage Booth described, which exists to give credit where it's due, because Booth based the location on a real access point that Egyptologists do sometimes use for maintenance surveys. The passage is real. It leads to exactly the kind of sealed space that his story described. The chamber is there. The egg is not. The bishop stands in a 5,000-year-old room lit by torchlight and processes. In absolute silence, the fact that she drove to Egypt chasing a story that a man she spent her career outranking built specifically to move her out of position. The look on her face when she turns around and finds Hartley and Booth standing at the passage entrance. That's a look worth the price of admission. It's worth pausing here, because this is the moment the movie quietly promotes Booth. Everything before this point has positioned him as the talented but second-tier operator. Quick with a quip, good with a lock, clever enough to stay alive in situations that should have ended him, but always running slightly behind the people at the top of the game. He's We2 on the most wanted list. It got outmaneuvered in Bali. He walked into the Valencia vault late. By the film's own established hierarchy, Booth is good. The bishop is better, except she just walked into Egypt on the strength of a story Booth built in his head over 3 years of preparation for a moment that hadn't happened yet. He didn't build the false tip after being captured. He built it before, during a time when he had no reason to expect this specific situation, because he understood that the bishop would eventually be in a position to squeeze him for intelligence and he wanted to be ready. That's not E2 thinking. That's someone who has been underselling himself for a long time and just showed his hand. Hartley notices, files it away. The bishop recovers fast. She always does. But recovery takes energy, and the recalibration from believing you're winning to understanding you've been steered costs something even when you won't admit it. Soto Voce, back in Valencia, has already discovered she went to Egypt without him. The partnership is cracking. He's furious in a way that arms dealers who have just been sidelined by their own partners tend to be furious, loudly, with resources. That fracture is exactly what Hartley needed. 2 enemies running against each other is manageable. The same 2 enemies running a coordinated operation is a different problem entirely. Voce hunting the bishop independently means 2 separate threat vectors that Hartley can potentially use against each other, play one into the other's path and let the collision create the opening. The board has shifted. Egg E3 is still out there. The real location, the one Booth has actually been working on beneath the Egypt decoy, is somewhere he hasn't told Hartley yet. That reveal is coming, but not here, not in a pyramid chamber with the bishop 3 feet away processing a very bad 48 hours. First, they have to get out of Egypt, which, relative to a Russian prison and a Valencia arms dealer estate, turns out to be the most straightforward exit of the film so far. Sometimes the universe balances the difficulty curve. Argentina is next, and the thing buried in a jungle that nobody, not the bishop, not Soto Voce, not Interpol, has any idea is there yet. Argentina doesn't look like the end of a treasure hunt. That's intentional. Booth chose this location partly because of what it holds, and partly because of what it looks like from the outside, which is nothing. A country that absorbs geography, the way South America absorbs everything, enormously, indifferently, with no particular interest in helping outsiders navigate it. The specific region they're heading into sits several hours outside Buenos Aires, past the point where roads become suggestions and the tree line closes in with the particular density of jungle that has not been asked to accommodate anyone for a very long time. Hartley and Booth trek in on foot. The jungle has no interest in their timeline. Booth explains it on the way. The real story? Not the Egypt decoy, but the actual trail he's been following. After World War II, significant quantities of looted European art and cultural objects disappeared into South America through rat lines, the escape networks that moved Nazi officials, assets, and cargo out of a collapsing Germany before the Allies could catalog what had been taken. Some of those objects ended up in private collections, some in storage facilities. Some were deliberately concealed in structures built specifically to house them, in locations remote enough that the concealment was as much geographic as architectural. Egg A3 ended up here because someone, in 1945, made a decision to take it as far from Europe as a ship could carry it and bury it somewhere the post-war world wouldn't think to look. Booth found the paper trail and the records of a decommissioned Swiss bank, a private deposit reference, a shipping manifest, a land survey from the Argentine interior dated 1947. 3 documents that nobody else had connected because they were filed under 3 different names in 3 different archives on 2 different continents. He connected them because he had nothing but time and a very specific obsession. Hartley listens to all of this and says nothing for a long beat. "You actually found it," he says finally. "Not a question. I actually found it," Booth confirms. The bunker reveals itself gradually, first as a concrete edge pushing through decades of overgrowth, then as a wall, then as a structure that is definitively, unmistakably human-made in a place that has no business having anything human-made in it. The jungle has been reclaiming it slowly since the 1970s, vines threading through gaps in the concrete, roots working at the foundation the way roots work at everything, eventually, patiently, without malice, just doing what roots do. The entrance is low. They have to duck through it. Inside is wrong in every direction. Wrong era, wrong continent, wrong century for what's sitting on the shelves and stacked against the walls. Crates with German stenciling. Canvas-wrapped objects of various sizes, the kind of systematic, bureaucratic organization that feels deeply strange in an abandoned underground room in the Argentine jungle, like the paperwork of a nightmare. Someone cataloged all of this. Someone built an inventory. Someone fully intended to come back. They didn't come back. The egg is near the back of the main chamber, unwrapped, sitting in a purpose-built case that has kept it pristine through 80 years of humidity and temperature variation. Gold catches the light from their torch beams, and the jewel work glitters with the specific indifference of objects that have never needed human attention to maintain their beauty. Egg H3, right there. Booth picks it up with the care of a man who has spent years earning the right to hold this exact object. There's no quip, no performance. Just a moment of quiet that is more honest than anything else he's shown the entire film. Hartley watches him, doesn't rush it. They have approximately 30 seconds to appreciate the find before the bishop walks into the bunker. She tracked them from Egypt, which, in retrospect, was probably always possible. The bishop losing the pyramid round didn't mean she lost access to every other intelligence thread she'd been running. Booth moving to Argentina is a signal anyone watching his historical research pattern could have anticipated. She anticipated it. Behind her, visible in the bunker entrance, 2 armed members of her team. The 3-way standoff assembles itself with the quiet efficiency of something everyone in the room saw coming, but nobody had a clean solution to. Bishop has backup, Hartley has mass and training, Booth has the egg in his hands and the awareness that he's the most leverageable person in the room right now, which is not a comfortable position. The negotiation that follows runs about 45 seconds and covers an enormous amount of ground. Bishop wants the egg, Booth is holding the egg, Hartley wants the bishop. The bishop's team wants to resolve this without property damage to anything that costs 100 M. Everybody wants to leave Argentina alive. It's the rare moment in the film where all 3 parties have so many overlapping constraints that the negotiation is genuinely uncertain. Nobody has a clean play. Then Das walks in. Inspector Das has been patient long enough. She tracked them both across 4 countries, watched a Valencia masquerade ball turn into a private security incident she got about 10 minutes of useful intelligence from, and now she's standing in a Nazi bunker in the Argentine jungle holding an Interpol warrant that covers literally everyone present. Her entrance doesn't have the theatrical flair of the bishop's. It doesn't need to. She walks in with 6 officers and the specific energy of someone who has been doing her job correctly this entire time, while everyone around her has been running global capers, and she is done waiting for the situation to resolve itself. The 3-way standoff becomes a 4-way standoff, which is mathematically worse for everyone. Hartley looks at Das, Das looks at Hartley. The unspoken conversation between them covers a lot of their shared history in about 2 seconds. His arrest, the frame job, the revoked credentials, every interaction they've had across 3 continents that has put them on opposite sides of a line that was supposed to be simple and turned out to be anything but. He tells her, "Give me the bishop," and the frame unravels. The 8M transfer, the forged credentials, all of it. The bishop built it. The bishop can confirm it by her own actions if Hartley can get her into a room where her options have run out. Doss doesn't agree, but she doesn't move yet either. The bishop, reading all of this, makes the only logical decision left: run. The chase that erupts out of the bunker and into the jungle surrounding it is fast, loud, and thoroughly destructive. The bishop's team creates enough chaos to give her a 30-second head start, and 30 seconds is all she ever needs. Car, because of course she has a car staged nearby, because she always has a car, is a pre-war Mercedes that has no right to still be functional and yet absolutely is, which says something about either its original construction quality or the bishop's preparation standards. Hartley and Booth get to their vehicle. It is not a pre-war Mercedes. The chase runs through terrain that was not designed to be chased through, narrow jungle roads that open suddenly into cleared sections, then close again into tight corridors where speed is a gamble and visibility is measured in meters. The bishop handles the Mercedes with the controlled aggression of someone who has done evasive driving in worse conditions. Hartley drives the way he does everything, with maximum commitment to a line once chosen. Then the road drops into the copper mine. The mine is the film's biggest action set piece, and it commits completely to the premise, an industrial-scale excavation that's been partially decommissioned but not fully cleared, with the kind of structural instability that announces itself in rumbles and falling debris, and the very specific sound of something large deciding it has held its weight long enough. The sequence has real scale to it. Not just visual scale, though the mine's physical dimensions are genuinely impressive on screen, but the kinetic scale of objects the size of machinery moving at speeds they weren't designed to move at, through spaces that are actively trying to close around them. The bishop's Mercedes navigates the descent with extraordinary precision. Hartley pushes their vehicle through the gaps the bishop's exits create, which is both tactically sound and genuinely terrifying. Booth, for his part, holds the egg container with both hands and says several things that don't need to be repeated here but accurately reflect the general emotional tenor of the situation. The mine is collapsing around all of them. Das and her team, coming in from the jungle road above, can see the situation deteriorating in real time and have approximately zero good options for intervention. The copper mine doesn't care about Interpol warrants. It's doing what collapsing structures do, making the problem everyone's problem equally. They come out the other side, all three of them, Hartley, Booth, and the bishop, emerging from different exit points of the mine into the flat afternoon light of the Argentine countryside, vehicles damaged, everyone breathing harder than they were 20 minutes ago, the immediate physical chaos behind them. The egg is intact. Booth checked before anything else. All three eggs are technically in play. Bishop has egg 1 from Bali, egg 1 from Bali, egg 2 is still technically Sotovoshi's until someone relieves him of it, and egg A3 is in Booth's hands right now. The 300M buyer is still waiting. The Egyptian wedding date is still on the calendar. Das and her team are regrouping above. The bishop looks across the space between the vehicles at Hartley. He looks back. The chase just ran itself into a draw, a violent copper mine-sized draw, but a draw nonetheless. Nobody won the mine. Nobody was supposed to. What matters is where everyone is standing when the dust settles, and what cards each person is still holding. Hartley is still standing, still holding the game together by sheer force of professional will. Booth is still holding egg U3. Grinning now, slightly manic from adrenaline, but grinning. The bishop is already calculating what happens next. What happens next, it turns out, is the part of the movie that changes the shape of everything that came before it. Argentina is done. The reckoning is somewhere warmer. Getting 3 priceless stolen eggs into one room requires a specific kind of trust, the kind that nobody in this story has actually earned from anyone else, which makes the logistics interesting. The arrangement that gets assembled in the aftermath of Argentina is built entirely on mutual necessity. The bishop still has egg HI1. Egg A2 requires either stealing it cleanly from Sotto Voce or leveraging the bishop's fractured partnership with him to move it. And with Sotto Voce already furious about being left behind in Valencia, the fracture turns out to be useful. He's angry enough to be manipulated, which the bishop handles with the practiced ease of someone who has been managing volatile men with resources her entire career. Egg A2 moves. Egg A2-3 is Booth's. All 3 eggs converge. The unnamed Egyptian billionaire receives what he paid for, the complete set, authenticated, delivered ahead of his daughter's wedding with enough margin to arrange the presentation properly. $300 million gets wired to two accounts, one belonging to a woman the financial system knows as Sarah Black, one belonging to a trust structure with Hartley's name buried 3 layers deep inside it. Doss watches the transaction clear from an Interpol monitoring station and cannot immediately explain what she's looking at. Neither can the FBI. Booth has been quiet for 2 hours, which is unusual. He's been tracking the accounts, not the Bishop's account. That's properly masked behind enough shell companies to take a forensic team 6 months to unravel. The one he's been watching is Hartley's, the trust structure, the one that received half of 300M about 90 minutes ago. A wire transfer can move in both directions. Booth makes a call, provides some specific routing numbers to an Interpol financial crimes contact he's cultivated over the years, specifically for situations like this. A relationship that exists in a gray zone he's never had to define out loud until now. He gives them the account details, the timestamps, the transfer record that shows an FBI profiler who was supposedly framed receiving an 8-figure payout from the world's largest ongoing art theft. By the time the Bishop and Hartley's accounts are frozen, Booth is already on a flight to Paris. The look on Hartley's face when the notification hits his phone, actually, we'll get to that. Paris in the evening looks exactly like it sounds, which is why people keep choosing it for important conversations. Something about the light and the architecture creates the impression that whatever is being discussed carries weight, which is useful when what you're about to discuss is genuinely heavy. Booth finds them at a cafe, not stumbles onto them, not tracks them down through some laborious process, finds them because he knew where to look, because he'd already figured out the shape of what was happening before the accounts got frozen, and the cafe is exactly the kind of place 2 people running a very long, very successful con would choose to sit while the money settled. 2 people, Hartley and the Bishop, sitting across from each other. No tension between them, no professional wariness, no maintained distance. The opposite of all that. Here's the thing about long cons. The best ones feel like friendship. The real ones always do, which is how they work. You're not just deceiving a mark about facts, you're deceiving them about relationship, about trust, about who you are to them. The most sophisticated version of that is what Hartley and the Bishop have been running. Not just on Booth, not just on Doss and the FBI and Interpol, but on everyone including the audience that's been watching Hartley as the nominal straight man, the law enforcement anchor, the guy whose job it is to bring this all to a close, cleanly. He's not that. He was never that. John Hartley and Sarah Black, the Bishop, are partners. Romantic partners and criminal partners, which in their world are apparently the same category. They've been together long enough and have worked together in enough operations that the roles they played in this story, FBI profiler hunting the world's most dangerous art thief, were costumes worn for a specific purpose, and the purpose is now complete. The 300M is a number worth sitting with for a moment. Split between 2 people who had a plan running across multiple countries, multiple moving pieces, and multiple real law enforcement agencies they used as unwitting stage props in a scheme designed to deliver them the entire prize. That's an outcome that required everything to go roughly right. Everything went roughly right. Booth sits down, he orders something, takes his time with it, looks at them both with an expression that is doing several things at once. The processing of betrayal, the grudging appreciation of craftsmanship, the specific calculation of a man who's just realized the game he thought he was playing was actually a different game entirely, and he wasn't the player he assumed he was. So, Booth says, Hartley and the Bishop wait. The frame, Rome, the prison, Valencia, all of it. Hartley's expression is somewhere between apologetic and privately very pleased with himself. You used me, Booth says. Not outraged, he doesn't have the moral standing for outrage, and he knows it. Just stating the architecture of it. The whole time, I was the distraction, not just the distraction, the cover. The reason every law enforcement agency on the planet was looking at Booth and at the eggs and at the Bishop as a theft case, while Hartley, the FBI profiler embedded at the center of the investigation, was the invisible third hand ensuring everything moved toward the outcome he and the Bishop had already designed. Hartley's presence in the investigation wasn't a threat to the Bishop's plan. It was the Bishop's plan. Put the most credible law enforcement presence imaginable at the center of the operation, and nobody looks behind that presence for what's actually happening. The frame in Bali wasn't punishment. It was a mechanism. It got Hartley into the same cell as Booth, which is exactly where he needed to be to run the second half of the operation. Being arrested gave him the perfect cover to operate outside institutional oversight. Being stripped of his badge meant nobody at the FBI was monitoring his movements or requiring him to report in. He was free, hidden in plain sight as a disgraced agent, which is the one category of person that law enforcement stops watching carefully because the assumption is that their capacity for damage has already been contained. The assumption was wrong. The accounts Booth froze aren't staying frozen. Hartley explains this with the patient tone of someone who anticipated the move and built around it. The account structures are layered enough that the freeze hits the outer shell. Visible, traceable, satisfying to trigger, while the actual funds have already moved through enough routing nodes to be somewhere the freeze can't follow. Booth handed Interpol the impression of a win. The actual money is fine. Booth nods slowly. He figured. It was worth trying. The Louvre, Booth says, changing direction. The other two look at him. He lays it out. A job. The Louvre, Paris, the most visited museum in the world and, depending on who you ask, the single most challenging target in the art theft landscape. The security infrastructure is serious. The collection is extraordinary. The cultural profile of pulling anything from it would make every previous theft in this story look like shoplifting. The bishop glances at Hartley. Hartley looks at Booth for a long moment. When? He asks. Das issues 3 red notices before the evening is over. E. John Hartley, Sarah Black, Nolan Booth, the highest level Interpol warrants available. With global distribution, every law enforcement agency on the planet officially notified that these 3 specific people need to be found and brought in immediately. Booth gets his number 1. It cost him slightly more than he expected. Das sits in her office with the 3 warrant files open on her screen. A disgraced FBI profiler, the world's greatest art thief, and the man who spent the entire operation as the wild card, and allows herself a moment to process the fact that she was right about all of them from the beginning and still couldn't stop any of it. She closes the files, opens them again. Somewhere in Paris, 3 people are having dessert and discussing a museum neither of them should be thinking about. Watching the twist land in real time, even if you've seen the film before, is a specific kind of pleasure. It doesn't require the audience to feel stupid for missing it. It invites you to feel impressed by the construction, because the construction genuinely holds up. Every scene with Hartley takes on a different weight once you know what he's doing. Every moment where he helped Booth, shielding him from Das at the Valencia party, proposing the partnership in the Russian cell, driving them to Egypt, reads as something different. He wasn't protecting an asset, he was operating one. The bishop's composure throughout makes complete sense. She was never rattled because she was never in real danger from the one person who seemed to be hunting her most aggressively. You can't be caught by someone who isn't actually trying to catch you. And Booth, running his own angles, planting false trails, trusting his own intelligence over everyone else's narrative, came closer to disrupting the whole thing than either Hartley or the bishop will probably admit. The account freeze landed, it just didn't land quite hard enough. Which is why, sitting across a table in Paris with a job proposal on the table and 3 Interpol red notices freshly issued in their names, both Hartley and the bishop look at Booth with something that reads distinctly like respect. Real respect, not the managed kind. Maybe that's the ending the movie actually earns. Not the heist, not the twist, not the record-breaking numbers. Just 3 people around a table who are, against all reasonable expectations, exactly where they want to be. 37% on Rotten Tomatoes, 92% audience score, one of the widest gaps the platform has logged for a major release. Critics called Red Notice hollow, expensive wallpaper, a movie that mistakes star power for storytelling. Some reviews read like a specific kind of professional frustration, the frustration of watching a film spend $200 million to deliver exactly what it promised and nothing more, as though the problem with the movie is that it was honest about its own ambitions. Audiences did not share the frustration. 328 million hours in 4 weeks, Netflix's most watched film at the time of release. The numbers weren't just good. They were the kind of good that makes studio executives say words like unprecedented and mean them. People didn't stumble into Red Notice and get tricked into watching it. They chose it, finished it, and an enormous number of them went back for a second viewing, which, for a heist movie built around a twist, says something specific about what they were actually showing up for. .en. The critics weren't wrong about the plot. Let's be honest about that. The story mechanics of Red Notice are not subtle. The villain twist follows a playbook that any seasoned genre viewer can feel assembling itself from around the halfway point. The MacGuffin, 3 golden eggs commissioned by Mark Antony, is cheerfully ridiculous, and the film knows it and doesn't particularly care. The globe-trotting locations serve as backdrop more than setting. Rome doesn't feel especially Roman. Bali doesn't breathe. The Argentine jungle could be any jungle with the right lighting. None of that is what people were watching. What people were watching is Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, and Gal Gadot in the same frame, doing the thing that all three of them do individually very well. Johnson's grounded physical authority, Reynolds' rapid-fire wit that lands because there's actual timing behind it and not just volume, Gadot's ability to project danger and elegance in the same expression without either quality undermining the other. Put those three energies in a room together and ask them to compete and cooperate simultaneously, and the result is something the plot doesn't need to justify. The chemistry is the movie. Everything else is scaffolding. Ross and Marshall Thurber understood this. His previous film with Johnson, Central Intelligence, ran the same play at a smaller scale. Take a performer whose screen presence does significant narrative heavy lifting, pair them with someone whose comedic energy creates contrast, and build a story loose enough to let the dynamic breathe. Red Notice scales that approach to a budget that most directors spend a career waiting for, and it doesn't squander it. The film looks expensive because it is expensive, and that expense is deployed almost entirely in service of keeping three specific people in interesting situations together. That's a legitimate creative choice. It's not a lazy one. What does Red Notice actually want to say? Stripped of the action sequences and the egg mythology and the Paris Cafe ending, the movie keeps returning to a single idea. The most reliable information you have about a person is usually wrong. Everyone in the story is operating on an incomplete read of everyone else. Doss thinks Hartley is a disgraced agent. Booth thinks Hartley is a straight arrow profiler using him as a tool. The audience thinks, for most of the runtime, that the bishop is the primary antagonist and Hartley is the anchor of moral clarity. None of those reads survive contact with the truth. There's something genuinely fun about a film that makes its central, unreliable narrator the good guy, or rather, the character coded as the good guy for long enough that the coding becomes the deception. Johnson spends most of Red Notice playing the straightest, most readable version of the character type he's known for. Big, reliable, morally grounded, the person you trust to be who they appear to be. Inverting that in the final act works precisely because it's Johnson doing it. A less established performer in that role, and the twist doesn't land with the same weight. The reliability of his screen persona is the thing being weaponized. Booth is the real emotional anchor, which is a weird thing to say about Ryan Reynolds playing a professional criminal. But his arc, from self-serving opportunist to genuine partner, from someone chasing a number on a list to someone choosing people over prize money when the real moment arrives, is the most complete character journey in the film. The Egypt Gambit isn't just a clever plot beat. It's the moment Booth reveals that his investment in this operation was never purely transactional. He built that false trail over years. That's not the behavior of someone coasting on talent. That's dedication. That's someone who cares about the game more than the reward. He just needed the right table to sit at. Netflix greenlit a sequel before the viewership numbers finished climbing. Red Notice 2 has been in various stages of development since late 2021, with the core trio attached and Thurber expected to return. Given the ending, 3 red notices, the Louvre on the horizon, 3 people who have earned each other's company the hard way, there's genuine material to work with. The first film spent most of its runtime assembling the team. The sequel gets to use it from the opening scene, which changes the dynamics significantly. The bickering into partnership arc is resolved. What's left is 3 people at the top of their respective games operating as a unit, which in the right hands is a more interesting setup than the original. Whether the sequel matches the first film's numbers is genuinely hard to predict. Lightning in a bottle audience responses are notoriously difficult to replicate on purpose. What made Red Notice work wasn't a formula. It was a specific combination of personalities at a specific moment, deployed in a specific way. You can rebuild the structure. The chemistry either returns or it doesn't, and that's not something a budget guarantees. What stays with me after Red Notice, and I've watched it more than once, which I'll admit freely, isn't the twist or the mind chase or even the Ed Sheeran cameo, though that last one does live in my head rent-free in a way I didn't anticipate. It's the smaller moments. Booth picking up Eggy 3 in the bunker and going quiet. Hartley in the Russian cell, furious and methodical, starting to see Booth clearly for the first time. The bishop moving through a crowded Valencia party with no mask that actually conceals anything, hiding in the open because she's always hiding in the open. Those moments don't require a 200M budget. They just require the right performers making the right choices in the right frame. Red Notice is not a great film by the standards critics use to measure great films. It is, however, an exceptionally well-executed version of exactly what it set out to be, which is a harder thing to achieve than it looks. Most movies that aim low miss anyway. This one hit its target cleanly at global scale and left an audience of 28 million watching hours wanting the next round. That's not nothing. That's actually quite a lot. If you've been watching this breakdown all the way through, thank you. Genuinely. This one ran long because the movie deserved the full treatment, not because of the plot, but because the mechanics of how it works are more interesting than the critical reception gave it credit for. If there's a movie you want the same breakdown for, drop it in the comments. I read them. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is a perfectly reasonable time to fix that. There are more of these coming, and the next one is going to be a very different kind of film that I think is going to surprise you. Stay curious, and watch Red Notice again with the twist in mind. It plays completely differently. The party itself deserves more than a passing mention, because Thurber uses it well. Masquerade settings have been a heist movie staple long enough that audiences arrive with certain expectations baked in. The disguise that fails at the worst moment, the close call near the buffet table, the tuxedo that turns out to contain exactly one useful hidden pocket. Red Notice acknowledges all of those expectations and then moves slightly sideways from them, which keeps the sequence feeling fresh even when the individual components are familiar. What works specifically is the mask dynamic. At a regular party, Hartley's physical presence, and let's be direct, the man is not someone who blends into a crowd under normal circumstances, would be a liability from the moment he walked through the door. The masquerade format neutralizes that. Behind a formal mask, with black tie doing its leveling work, Hartley becomes legible primarily through posture and movement rather than features. That changes his threat calculation significantly. He can move through the party in a way that would be impossible without the costume. Booth, for his part, is entirely in his element. This is worth saying plainly. Social infiltration is Booth's most underrated skill. The lockpicking and the forgery expertise get the screen time, but the reason Booth has operated successfully across 18 countries without getting caught isn't just technical proficiency. It's the ability to occupy a social space so convincingly that the question of whether he belongs there never quite forms in anyone's mind. At the Valencia ball, surrounded by sotto voce's guests, arms dealers, private collectors, the category of wealthy person whose wealth has specific and not very pleasant origins, Booth moves like someone who arrived early and has already spoken to everyone worth speaking to. He charms a woman near the champagne table, gets a floor layout in 30 seconds of conversation she'll never remember clearly. Hartley watches this from across the room with an expression that is technically neutral and actually deeply reluctant to be impressed. The party also gives the film one of its quieter character beats, a moment where Das, working her own surveillance angle near the Eastern Terrace, gets close enough to Booth to make a grab, and Hartley, who has spotted Das before Booth has, creates a minor social obstruction that redirects her attention just long enough for Booth to clear the exposure window. Booth doesn't see it happen! He doesn't know Hartley just covered him. That's the interesting part, because at this stage of the story, Hartley's motivation for protecting Booth is supposed to be purely operational. Can't catch the bishop without him. Can't have him arrested now. That's the logical explanation, and it's entirely sufficient. But there's a moment in the coverage where Johnson plays it with something slightly warmer than pure calculation, and it plants a small seed of ambiguity that the ending will later harvest. Is Hartley genuinely starting to like Booth? Or is he managing an asset with enough sophistication that it looks like genuine warmth? Both, probably. The best long cons always are. The music shifts. Somewhere across the ballroom, a British pop star finishes a song. The crowd applauds, briefly becoming the distraction that allows Hartley and Booth to slip toward the corridor leading to the lower level. They have about 4 minutes before the security rotation closes the window. 4 minutes, as it turns out, is just enough time to wish they had 6. Standing in that bunker, in the silence between finding the egg and the bishop's arrival, there's a moment that the film gives you, brief, maybe 10 seconds of screen time, where Hartley and Booth just exist in the space without an immediate threat bearing down on them. It's the quietest the movie gets. The weight of the room is doing a lot of work. This is a place built by people who committed history's most documented atrocity, filled with objects taken from people who had no ability to refuse the taking. The jeweled egg sitting in its purpose-built case represents one category of theft: calculated, acquisition-minded, the theft of objects for their monetary and cultural value. What surrounds it represents something categorically different: theft as a mechanism of erasure, the systematic removal of cultural and personal identity from an entire civilization of people. Red Notice doesn't linger on this. It's a popcorn action comedy, not a historical drama, and asking it to fully reckon with the moral weight of a Nazi bunker in the middle of its third act is probably unfair. But Thurber doesn't ignore it either. The production design makes sure you register what you're looking at. The Germans stenciling on the crates, the inventory list still pinned to a wall, the particular kind of order imposed on this space that speaks to bureaucratic infrastructure rather than individual greed. Someone documented all of this. Someone believed they would return to administer it. Booth, who has spent his career taking things from people without asking, stands in a room that puts his entire professional identity in uncomfortable context. The film doesn't say this out loud. It doesn't need to. Reynolds plays the moment with enough stillness that you feel the weight landing, even if neither the character nor the script articulates it explicitly. Hartley says nothing. Sometimes the right response to a room is silence. The egg goes into the carry case Booth brought specifically for this retrieval. Custom padded, temperature regulated, the kind of equipment you only invest in when you're confident the job is going to complete successfully. The confidence, in retrospect, was warranted. 3 years of research, 2 continents of false leads, 1 perfectly constructed decoy story deployed at exactly the right moment, and the egg is exactly where the documents said it would be. There is something almost poignant about that, not the finding of a priceless stolen artifact. That's the plot. The poignant thing is the vindication of the work. Booth spent 3 years on this in a world that ranked him permanently second, in a career where his biggest competitor moves through the same spaces he moves through and consistently arrives first. 3 years of meticulous, unglamorous archival research, done alone, for an object that nobody else had managed to locate. He found it. That matters to him independently of the 300M. You can see it in the way he handles the case once the egg is secured. Carefully, yes, but also with a kind of ownership that isn't possessiveness so much as authorship. He didn't just steal this, he solved it. Hartley picks up one of the inventory sheets from the wall, reads it briefly, sets it back down. "We should move," he says. Booth closes the case. "Yeah." They turn toward the entrance. The bishop is standing there. "Let me tell you what I actually think. Not the critical consensus, not the box office framing. What I think, having spent genuine time inside this movie's bones, the thing that makes it worth a 2-hour breakdown even when the plot mechanics are, by serious film standards, as sturdy as a paper bridge. Red Notice is a movie about competence. Specifically, it's about the pleasure of watching genuinely skilled people operate at the top of their range, even when what they're skilled at is illegal, morally compromised, or built entirely on deception. Hartley, Booth, and the Bishop are each extraordinary at what they do, and the film's fundamental appeal is the same appeal that makes any great heist movie work. We love watching people be good. We love the architecture of expertise made visible, the lock that opens cleanly, the social engineering that lands, a long con reveal that demonstrates, retroactively, that someone was 17 steps ahead while appearing to stand still. That's not a shallow pleasure. That's a deeply human one. There's also something quietly interesting about which character the audience actually roots for as the film progresses. On paper, Hartley is the anchor, the law enforcement presence, the person whose redemption arc structures the first half. But watch a room of people experience the film for the first time and their energy tracks Booth. His losses land harder, his wins play bigger. His character arc? From competitive, self-serving operator to someone who chooses the harder, lonelier play of integrity when nobody is watching, is the emotional spine of the movie in a way the plot doesn't fully acknowledge. The Egypt Gambit, built over 3 years, deployed in the right moment for the right reason, is as close to a heroic act as Red Notice offers. It just happens to be heroic in the register of a career criminal who doesn't use that language and would be deeply uncomfortable if you used it about him. Ryan Reynolds has made a career of playing characters whose humor is armor, wit deployed fast enough that nobody has time to look for what it's protecting. Booth is that character done well. The laughs are real. So is the thing underneath them. Where the movie earns genuine criticism is in its surfaces. The locations don't breathe. Rome, Bali, Spain, Egypt, Argentina, all of them beautiful, none of them inhabited with the specificity that makes a setting feel like more than backdrop. A great location-driven film makes you feel the weight of a place. Its smell, its friction, the way it pushes back against the characters moving through it. Red Notice treats its locations as wallpaper for the chemistry, and while that's an understandable choice given what the film is actually selling, it costs the movie something. The Argentine jungle sequence comes closest to landing geographically. The bunker has real texture, real historical mass, but it's the exception rather than the rule. The villain structure also leans heavily on the twist, doing work that character development could have done more elegantly. Sotto Voce is an arms dealer who exists almost entirely as a narrative function rather than a person. His menace is stated rather than felt. For a film with enough budget to build anything it wanted, the decision to invest everything in the three leads and almost nothing in the antagonist infrastructure is a choice that shows. These are real weaknesses, worth naming rather than waving away. But here's my honest final position. Red Notice knows exactly what it is, executes that thing at an extraordinary level of craft and investment, and delivered an experience that 328 million hours of viewing time confirms landed for the people it was made for. Dismissing that as a lesser achievement requires a definition of cinema that excludes joy as a legitimate outcome, and I'm not interested in that definition. Some movies change how you see the world. Some movies are 2 hours in the right company, laughing at the right moments, genuinely surprised by a twist in the last act. Both of those things matter. Neither cancels the other. If you enjoyed this breakdown, if any part of it made you see the film differently, or made you want to watch it again with new eyes, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach people who'd want to be here. Subscribe if you haven't yet. The next breakdown is already planned and it goes in a completely different direction. Darker, slower, the kind of film that rewards the kind of close attention we gave Red Notice in ways that will make this one feel like warm-up. And drop a comment answering this. Did you see the Hartley twist coming? And if not, what was the exact moment you realized something was off? I want to know. I read every one. R. Bread and Y.